Hey, how you doing? The name's Cat Dad Things, and today we're back in Albion Online. Before, I had a video about T3 weapons, and I kind of showcased all the different weapons to everyone, especially for new players, kind of showing off what you can do with them. So I thought I'd continue the series and go through basically the entire Destiny board, all the different armors, all the different weapons that you see, and to kind of showcase them because, as some of us may know, or maybe you're just starting out, it takes forever to try and get your weapons and your armor pieces to max spec, let alone getting the spec on specific weapons and items as well. It takes a long time. It's a lot of grinding. Even if you buy it, if you like swiping the card, it still takes forever. So today I thought I'd go through every single weapon, and then followed by that, I'll check out the armors as well. That way we can kind of make sure our investments are worth our time. So we're not wasting our time specking things, because when you, for example, let's see if something max spec, you go to unspec it. So I have my swords at 100. Look at that. It'll give me my combat credits I can put up into here. But that's a lot of silver just to make an uh-oh mistake that's taken me so long to grind out anyway, so let's not do that. So to start off, I'm going to start with two of my favorite weapon trees, axes and swords. I love axes. Axes are so fun. It's my favorite weapon in the entire game. I just love all the different interactions they have. I don't have them all fully max spec'd out, but I'm working on it. We're getting there. So, on my little tune here, my island, I have all the different weapons for the axes and the swords, all the basic weapons leading into the artifacts, same thing with swords, basic weapons leading into artifacts. So I'll take these out into the field and we'll test each one. That way you can kind of see their abilities, all their base abilities that you can get, all the extra slots here. And then, of course, every single weapon has its own unique E. And I'll test those out as well, kind of explain them a little bit. That way you can see for yourself. Oh, and just one more thing, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel if you like these kinds of videos. Leave me a comment if you have any feedback or something else you want to see. It really does help the channel grow, as I'm really trying to get this thing underway and provide more content for you guys. So I'd appreciate any help in the meantime. So let's now go over to the field. Alright, so to start things off with the axes, we have the Q1 ability, Rending Strike. It is a single target ability. You hit the enemy, you whack them over the head with it, and it applies a bleed stack, stacks up to 3 times, and then it has a heal debuff. Very strong ability, highly recommend. Next up on Q2 is Rending Spin. It does a small AoE, does a little bit less damage than Rending Strike, but you have to hit them within the circle, kind of like Darius from League of Legends, his Q. It's great if you have low spec, especially when you're trying to do group mob stuff and team fights. Last but not least, we have Q3. It can be worked in as a combo, and the best part about the ability is it provides some mobility as well as a root. If you have the spec for this and unlock it, definitely always use this ability. You do have to have a lot of spec again to unlock, but it is your bread and butter if you can use it. Moving to the W slot, the first ability, Deadly Chop. It does a big chunk of damage and also applies a debuff. It lowers the resistances of your enemy for a quite sizable amount of time, so very strong ability. Second ability on your W is Adrenaline Boost. Remember, when you use this ability, you do have to hit something with direct damage or it will wear off halfway through the duration. It gives you movement speed and attack damage increase as well. Very good, especially in the open world. For the third ability, I would use situationally. It is called Battle Rush. It's basically a mobility jump. It increases healing for allies and decreases healing for enemies. So, depending on your matchup and what you're trying to accomplish, it might come in handy. Our fourth W is Internal Bleeding. It does an AoE circle effect around you, and it applies a separate bleed stack every time the target moves, they take damage. The fifth and final ability is Raging Blades. They twirl axes around you in an AoE doing damage. Every time they hit a target, they increase your overall percentage output, so your normal attacks, your other abilities, will have a buff on them due to this ability. Axes come with 4 passives, all auto-based. Deep Cups gives you a dot, Life Leech gives you lifesteal, Increased Defense gives you more defense, and Aggressive Rush gives you more offense. Now moving on to the E's. The Battle Axe has Blood Bandit, and it does more damage depending on how many stacks you have on the target you throw in front of you. You can cast it again and get lifesteal from it, also depending on the stacks. With the Great Axe, you have Whirlwind, a spin-to-win AoE damage ability. It's a channel that is uninterruptible. You can't be stunned out of this. As you're using it on a target, you slowly ramp up more damage the longer you stay on a target. The Halberd's E is Tear Apart. Generally used in group content, when you have rending stacks on a target, you use your E, and everyone hit in the AoE around it, it'll spread the stacks around to everyone. It's a very strong 5v5 weapon. The carrion color E is Morgana Raven. It shoots a raven in a projectile line, hitting everyone in its path. It applies a healing cut at 30%, which is the strongest healing cut for the axe tree. It also does damage and applies a dot. The Infernal Scythe E is the Bloody Reap, and it has two parts to it. It does an AoE damage. The first part does a set amount of damage, but the second swing, if the target is under 40% HP, it increases the damage, generally used as an execute. The Bear Paws E is Razor Cut. You launch yourself in a direction with an arcing slash. Anyone in the arc gets hit with a dot and damage, and if you hit an enemy player with it, you get a 40% cooldown on the ability. The Realm Breaker's E, Aftershock, has a little bit of everything. You launch yourself in a cone in front of you, you hit enemies for a large amount of damage, knocking up anyone in the cone, as well as applying a debuff on their max HP. Now moving on to swords, the first Q ability, Heroic Strike, is a single target ability dealing damage. It gives you heroic charges. You can stack up to 3 times, and with each stack you get increased attack speed and movement speed. The second ability is on your Q2 is Heroic Cleave. It does a small AoE around you and applies heroic charges. If you hit multiple enemies, for example 3 enemies at a time, you'll get 2 stacks of heroic charge instead of 1, so it can work in different situations. Our first ability on W is Interrupt. It can interrupt spellcasting and channeling. It does some damage, and at the same time, depending on how many heroic charges you have, it will increase your auto attack damage. Very good at dueling. Our second W ability is Iron Will. It gives you a heroic charge stack automatically, increases defense, as well as makes you immune to purges. The third W is called Hamstring. It applies damage and a slow to the target. You can consume a heroic charge to recast it and stack it up 2 times to apply more of a slow. The fourth W is Splitting Slash. It fires off in a projectile in a straight line. Anyone caught in it will be rooted and take damage. The final ability on W is Parry Strike. When you channel it, you become immune to all damage, and 100% of that damage received are reflected back to the enemy. It also does a small AoE of damage around you for anyone close enough. For the sword passives, they're all auto attack based. Deep Cuts gives a dot to the enemy. Weakening decreases the amount of damage the enemy does. Heroic Fighting will give you heroic charges, and Increased Defense will increase your defense depending on your auto attacks. The first E on our list is from the Broadsword, the Mighty Blow. Depending on how many heroic charges you have, you'll leap to your target and do increased damage for each charge. It does interrupt spellcasting. It's a very good 1v1 weapon. Next we have the Claymore E, which is Charge. It travels a distance, and similar to the Broadsword E, it does more damage based off the heroic charges you have. However, it is unstoppable, uninterruptible when you do cast it. It'll also briefly stun your enemy. For the dual swords, we have the Spinning Blades E. Depending on your stack, you'll do increased damage in an AoE. You leap towards a target destination, and when you hit an enemy, you get increased attack speed and attack damage for the duration of the buff. Next is the Clarent Blade with Crescent Slash. Depending on your charges, you can have a silence, a slow, or more damage proc. You throw it as a projectile in front of you, and it does an arcing slash. The Carving Sword has Fearless Strike for its E, and you dash in a line hitting any enemy in the way. It does flat damage, and heroic charges will increase the amount of resistances that you decrease on any target. Next is the Galatine pair with the Soulless Stream E, and depending on how many charges, it does massive AoE damage in a circle and decreases max and current HP of all targets affected. And finally, we have the Kingmaker with Majestic Smash. Depending on how many charges you do, can do massive AoE DPS. You knock up all the enemies in the air with a spin, and then you slam down your sword, doing most of your damage. That about sums it up for a feature of the axe and sword trees. If you are a beginner in this game, I highly recommend getting familiar with at least one of these weapon lines, as they are very versatile. They can be very cheap to use, very cost efficient, and they're usable in any kind of gameplay, generally in the game. So don't forget to like and subscribe if you enjoyed this content, and I'll see you all in the next one. Bye bye.